Remember when you were a kid and you were trying to race an AI while you played Mario Kart DS alone in your living room because you had no friends? Me neither. But if you did happen to be in that situation, then you may have accused the AI of cheating, and that's the only reason they won. Well, I'm here to tell you that you are absolutely, without a doubt, 100% correct. Well, sorta. You see, AI can cheat, for lack of a better term, in multiple ways, whether it be frame-perfect button combinations or just straight-up teleporting ahead in a race. But there are tons of different AI in games, and sometimes there are so few variables to manipulate. For example, a cheating AI in Smash is going to look and function completely different than a cheating AI in Pong. But today I want to focus on a completely different type of AI, and that's the AI in the video game counterparts of famous board games. More specifically,
welcome to Monopoly for Nintendo Switch.
Oh yeah, we're going there. While on the surface Monopoly is a more long-lasting and complex board game, a majority of who wins or loses is really based on randomness. Every property you land on, every tax you have to pay, that's all based on the number you roll. And while there's definitely strategy involved in Monopoly, the reality is, even the best players can lose if they're dealt the wrong dice rolls. However, this should also make it a rather fair game amongst players, seeing as how each dice roll is 1 out of 6. You'd expect 6 players of average intelligence and average knowledge of the game to win about 16.7% of the time, right? Well, first we have to understand how statistics works, because although you may feel like the game is treating you unfairly, it isn't entirely possible for you to just be that unlucky in that moment. For example, you can roll a die 60 times and never see the number 1 once, and that die can still be considered fair. That's just how probability works. Just because you're rolling the die and never see a specific number, that doesn't mean the die is loaded, and these effects are only amplified when you play with multiple die, like in a game of Monopoly. So what does this mean for our original thought that Monopoly cheats? Well, because Monopoly is such a random-based game, what actually makes the AI different? For example, if there is a very easy and a hard AI, what's separating the two? Surely it has to be some type of loaded dice tactic to make the opposing player more or less likely to win, right? Well, in order to test my hypothesis, I traveled to the far-reaching corners of my bedroom, slapped my Nintendo Switch on a tablet stand for a more comfortable viewing angle, and played Monopoly against each and every different type of AI that the game has to offer. 1v1, me versus the computer. Joy-Cons in hand and armed with the highest quality Excel sheet, I sat and played Monopoly. How long did it take, you might ask? About an hour and a half. Per game. So with 6 hours of my life wasted away, playing a board game that I believed was rigged, here's what I came up with. Well, before I started, I had to make an assumption about the game, and that was that the die on the left and on the right are always the same die for every roll, so I can properly calculate whether each die is fair. I also made a decision to accept every trade the AI proposed in order to keep it as fair as possible and to try and eliminate those trades out of the equation. I also attempted to get the same properties of each game to rule that out as a factor. While this isn't entirely possible because the game is completely random, I was able to get all the light blue properties 3 out of the 4 games I played, and those properties did help me win 2 of the games. That's right, I said 2 of the games. So if I won 2 of the games, does that mean I lost the other 2? Not exactly. You see, in order to test the fairness of a die, you only have to actually roll it 60 times, at least for a 6-sided die that is. So I stretch out each game until the players had rolled 120 times, 60 times per die. Unless they rolled doubles, then I just let them finish out their turn. So, with all this time put in, what exactly was I tracking? Well, I decided to track 3 main factors that I believe can swing a game in one's favor or not. Those factors are frequency of each die roll, the number of times each player rolled doubles, and lastly, the type of space each person landed on each turn. For type of spaces, I categorized them as good, neutral, or bad. I assigned these based on how the space affected your chance of achieving the lose condition, which, if you're familiar with Monopoly, is going bankrupt. So for example, a good space would be landing on a chance space, which read that you got a tax refund of $100. A neutral space would be landing on a space that didn't involuntarily affect your cash in the game, like landing on free parking or just visiting jail. I also put landing on an unknown property in this category as well, because even though that lowers your balance in the game, you are given the option to auction the space to the other player and not having to spend money. And lastly, a bad space would be landing on a property owned by the other player, resulting in you paying rent. However, if that property had been mortgaged, then this would just count as a neutral space. I also included anything resulting in you going to jail in this category because you are put in jail with the assumption that you'll have to pay $50 within 3 turns if you don't roll doubles. The AI usually ended up spending the $50 right away anyway, and I only rolled doubles once to get out of jail because I accidentally pressed the wrong button, so this was a safe bet in my eyes. Okay, now with all the background out of the way, what the heck did I find? Do AI really cheat Monopoly for Nintendo Switch, or am I just crazy and caught in a placebo? Well, drumroll please. What do you think? Here, let's take a look at the bar graph to make it easier to read. So, Still nothing? Okay, what if we look at the frequency of space types as pie charts? Well, do you see it now? Well, if this data doesn't make any sense, then allow me to explain. It means nothing. I spent 6 hours tracking all this data, and it's complete nonsense. Do you see which two AIs didn't even make it to the 60 rolls? Very easy and hard. The easiest and hardest AIs were the quickest to beat, and I only got halfway through the rolls on the hard AI. And then we start to see a pattern in frequency of bad spaces. Surely that has to be a difference. Very easy AI gave me 20% bad spaces. Easy was 43%. Well, that's more, right? It's got to be an answer. What about normal AI? 33%. Well, that's weird. How many times did I land on a bad space against the hard AI? 14%. That's the lowest one. The hard AI made the game easiest for me. So this entire video was pointless. Unless someone smarter out there, and there are a lot of you, can make a logical conclusion from this data and prove to me that the AI is actually getting more difficult as you go up in difficulty, then please leave a comment. Or if you'd like me to revisit this experiment and waste more of my time than yours, then please just leave a comment on how I can make this a little more fair and hopefully draw a more logical conclusion from this. Real quick, if this is your first introduction to my channel, I just want to let you guys know that this is a mainly 3D printing focused channel, so all the projects that I do here are going to center around 3D printing or have some type of 3D printing element. For example, the solution you're going to see in this video was made with a 3D printed case. Pretty self-explanatory stuff, but I do have some other projects I want to run by you guys. For example, this is a 3D printed modular controller. This guy was something that I prototyped in a non-functional way, and essentially you can take the analog sticks off and swap them with the D-pad, all fun stuff like that. So if that's something that you're interested in, please subscribe, like the video, show your support, and if you have any other ideas, some cool 3D printing centric ideas, then please just leave them right in the comments, and I'd love to read them. Wait, what solution? I just demonstrated that there isn't an actual problem, just that Ubisoft names their AI with no real rhyme or reason. What problem am I trying to solve? I mean, I guess I could write a strongly worded letter to Ubisoft, but this is technically a 3D printing channel. Wait, what's that? I created a solution without fully investigating the problem? Great. Huh. Yeah, I was kind of so sure that I'd find some type of weirdness in this game that I actually created an entire controller that uses a real die. Why did I jump the gun on this one? Well, you clearly haven't played Monopoly for Switch with friends and have been sent to jail 5 times in a row. Surely something was going on. Plus, I've always wanted to make a game controller, and now you're going to listen to me explain how this works. And you're going to like it. This is the Iris. Is that an acronym? Relatively intelligent system. It is now. So the Iris runs off an Arduino that is coded to act like a Bluetooth keyboard, meaning each of these buttons emulates an actual button press, except for this button, which can change depending on what color side of the die is read by this color sensor. And I'll admit, my C coding skills aren't amazing, but I sure can edit code like it's Inspect Element on your school computer, and luckily for me the bulk of this work has already been done by the great guys over at Adafruit. They supplied me with the code for the color sensor and the Bluetooth keyboard, and all I had to do was copy and paste some code and throw in some if statements, and boom! And what do we call it when we merge 2 already created codes together and try to pass it off as our own? Plagiarism! So how does this wonderful code that I'm taking full credit for work? Well, the color sensor reads red, green, and blue values, and thanks to my immense trial and error, I know the exact color that each of these sides read as. And most of the time, the controller reads it properly. Most of the time. Also, this originally was just going to be a die with some Sharpie on each side, but the black dots were interfering with the color reading of the sensor, so I had to design a whole die that wouldn't obstruct the sensor's view of the color on each side. Did I mention that I made the solution before even fully investigating the problem? But Kevin, you might be asking, you said that this was a solution? How did this interact with Monopoly? There's no way to rig die rolls in Monopoly for the Switch, right? You'd be correct. So I made my own game. So you engineered an entire Bluetooth controller and made an entire game before you even checked to see if Monopoly was rigged. Well, when you say it like that, I sound like an idiot. Now look at my game! So in reality, it's not a full-fledged game, but I do plan on making it one. But my primary focus on this video was just to get the die mechanic working. So in theory, I guess you could play this game with this controller if you're a 1930s gangster and the game is craps. But don't worry, I programmed a random function as well, just in case you want to waste 2 weeks of my life's work. But this game also can roll a specific number by pushing the number of the die you want to roll on the numpad. For example, to roll 1, you'd hit 1 on the numpad. Yeah, it's that simple. But when you combine the controller and the game together, you can translate real-world die rolls into a game that only exists on my computer. Played with a controller in which I own, the only one in existence. But it works! And honestly, it works way better than it should. Huh. So this whole project was kind of pointless, wasn't it? I wasted a month of my life building proprietary hardware and software before I even investigated a problem to begin with. Well, live and learn. In all honesty, I am super proud of this project, even if it wasn't what I intended it to be, and I would love to continue the work I started on making a board game that's playable with this controller, as well as playable with some of you guys who don't actually own the controller. This controller is also pretty easily programmable to be whatever keyboard press you want, so even though its intended purpose is to play a board game, I could just as easily program it to input random input for the arrow keys, for example, making playing Pokemon impossible. So if anyone out there streams, or knows of any streamers who I could send this to frustrate them, please share this video with them or leave their name down in the comments and I'll try to reach out to them. And if you can think of any other cool uses for a color reading controller, then by all means, leave your suggestions down in the comments.